So I might just now introduce Michele Frankeni. She's our editor of Australian Catholics magazine. She has been assistant editor for Australian Catholics for a number of years, and also edits our Parish Life newsletter, and previously Catholic Teacher in newsletter. So Michele has a long background in journalism, well, she's a great gift to our team. So I might just turn it over to Michele to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mick, and thank you all for taking the time out to join us today. I suppose the first question, the big question is, can media be used for good? I mean, after all, rankings and professions' trustworthiness and honesty tend to put journalists down at the lower end of the scale, around 15% of the mark. While it's above politicians and real estate agents, it's well short of the teaching profession, which according to last year's Roy Morgan poll had teachers ranked 4th in trustworthiness at 74%. Anyway, today, Eureka Street editor David Halliday and Australian Catholics assistant editor for education and youth, Laura Kings, join me to talk about the value of media and how best to use it to make a positive difference in the world. And while we and others in the media acknowledge that sometimes some media is execrable, media is also where we turn for information when disaster strikes, or we need to shine a light in some shady corners. Laura, who joined the Jesuit communications team earlier this year, has extensive experience in media education. She brings a unique perspective today, being both a teacher and journalist. Her focus this afternoon will be on media literacy, and she has a number of practical ways of engaging students in the RE classroom using digital media. David's been Eureka Street editor for a couple of years. He's had extensive experience in media and with Catholic media especially, previously working for the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne, and was a guest editor for Vinnie's for a short period, thanks to LinkedIn, David. Curly question to you first, David. Can media be for good?
Yeah, that's the good question. I think to answer that it's probably worthwhile looking at current perceptions of media and can it be used, to polarize us and to make us more divided. And I think definitely, and I think that that sort of came to the fore, especially during COVID. You see a lot of media companies running polemics and sort of contributing to echo chambers, and it's sort of I think from that media can get a pretty bad rap. But yeah, absolutely, as you said earlier, I think can media be used for good? I mean, of course, because it's it's the fourth estate. We use it to hold power to account, and it's definitely in the public interest to shine that light into dark corners, as you said. Yeah, so I think what we're seeing now, I think, is probably more where you're seeing a lot of companies driving animosity. You're seeing that become a little bit more of a business model. And I'm sort of looking at social media companies as well, where the content you see in your news feed, say Facebook or YouTube, is sort of selected for us by algorithms to kind of keep our eyes glued to the screen for the maximum time as possible, and to foster kind of that moral outrage. And fostering that moral outrage and kind of stoking those fires is something you do see everywhere, but I think that's kind of what I would be thinking more is kind of part of the problem these days. And I think even in sort of bigger places, we live in a very fractured media environment, but there are lots of small publications, especially where you have kind of the modern day equivalent of dragging someone into the town square and everyone kind of pelts them with fruit, which is fun to read, but I think is not really helpful to creating a constructive public dialogue. So I don't think that most publications are kind of existing trying to be provocateurs, but I think I think every publication, every journalist has kind of a moral framework, and trying to engage in each issue with any kind of good faith. these issues, that I might kind of care very deeply about. But I think, to be a media for good, you do need to have, there is that responsibility to tell the truth as accurately as possible. That responsibility to the reader. And I think for Eureka Street, that's, I don't know how much you want me to get into kind of our kind of point of difference at the moment, or kind of jumping the gun.
That was where I was going to go next. Yeah, tell us about Eureka Street and how it fits into like positive dialogue and being a force, for good. Well, not being a polarizing force. I'm sure that you'll say this better than me, but we're not afraid of differing views, but there is a way of communicating those views that are not particularly polarizing.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's been done since the founding. So for anyone who doesn't know, Eureka Street's been around for 31 years, and yeah, and it was always kind of this strange beast between kind of faith-based media, like part kind of tablet almost, and secular, like part kind of New Yorker or like Esquire or something like that, kind of living in that space where faith meets culture. And it always had that kind of strong Jesuit voice, with writers like Mick Kelly and Andrew Hamilton, who still writes. And it also did have that strong secular voice as well. So yeah, it did approach, I think because that was part of its founding, that was kind of baked into its DNA, that it did need to be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So the way it approached various issues, I think, was unique. So did come at cultural and national matters from like a faith or values perspective, still wasn't afraid to shake things up, wasn't afraid to challenge the political, religious, cultural status quo or the establishment, just in order to drive productive conversation. But yeah, I think our point of difference is that we place human dignity at the forefront. So there's no polemics, there's no kind of point scoring, no cheap shots. I think when you start doing point scoring, and that's sort of part of the media system, I think you do see it everywhere. I think that's definitely part of the problem. Like takedown pieces kind of adds to the noise, adds to the overall political turbulence. So what we want to do, part of our aim is to drive a productive conversation that doesn't belittle people, doesn't belittle anyone for anything, because we want to approach this conversation from a framework of, as I said, valuing human dignity, and that applies to people we might not like as well. We had, I don't know how much to get into examples, but there was one piece that sort of comes to mind that there was about. It was about kind of the belief system of Scott Morrison back when he was PM, and it was sort of poking fun a bit of his religious beliefs, and in a way, he's sort of like, I think saying what you like about someone's policy and their actions is sort of fair play, but yeah, I think it sort of crossed the line there. So we didn't run those bits. So I think to ridicule people we disagree with is definitely antithetical to the Eureka Street mission. So yeah, we can talk about the PM's belief system and how that might impact policy, and I think that's really important. But we do need to keep in mind that our leaders are still human beings with human dignity, regardless of what we think about them or their choices or anything like that. So I think, yeah, that definitely ties into kind of the overall, the Jesuit mission, the Eureka Street mission, which is, about nurturing conversations about faith and justice to build a better world. There you go. That was long and rambling.
Sorry, I need to unmute. That was good. How do you see your role? And, are people receptive to this new way of talking? to being kind to each other and being respectful of conversations.
So the first part, what's my role? I'm editor of the publication, so I wear a lot of different hats. I keep a lot of the plates spinning, as it were. But I think in terms of kind of steering the ship in that regard, I think is very important, because we do get a lot of pieces that might not necessarily coincide with that idea of kind of placing human dignity at the forefront. How receptive are people? Yeah, I mean, have people, yes and no. I think there's always going to be a market for publications that do want to hit as hard as they can, as much as they can, and I think that was something that we saw a lot, even in Australia, particularly in the US, and you see it in the US now, particularly post 2016, that was sort of gloves are off for everyone. I think we're fortunate where we don't have a society that is quite as polarized, but I think people are receptive to that, and I think people are receptive to the idea that it is a place of psychological safety where people can discuss ideas, where all ideas are on the table, and every idea is going to get a rigorous shakedown, but it's going to get a shakedown not because of who's pitching it or who's discussing it, but I think all ideas do need to be discussed in a rigorous way. So I think that's always going to be welcome. So yeah, people have been receptive and are receptive, which is very positive.
Thank you. Eureka Street is online. How do you target your audience? And this is partly for you too, Laura. As a teacher, you said that you had experience with, how do you target audiences? How do you manage it, and how difficult it can be? So perhaps maybe Laura, you might want to talk about it first, and then we can talk. And then David, you can talk about how you, reach the audiences that you need to reach.
So do you want me to talk about how I target the audience when I'm working for Australian Catholics? Or so my target audience at Australian Catholics is teachers and students in Catholic schools, and Michele tends to do all the parish stuff. I just talk to teachers and students. So, and as Michele mentioned earlier, I'm in the lucky position where I started out life as a journalist, went and taught, ran a film and TV department for a while, and then moved across to English and RE as I got older, and I've just recently gone back into journalism with Australian Catholics. So I very much work with our younger writers in developing them, and I also do the Catholic Teacher newsletter. So so I'm very much looking at providing resources that teachers can use, and you'll see that I had to step in for poor old Michael, who's sick this week, and I've gone very teachery, less discussion and more just practical tips on how you can use media in the classroom. But I suppose. Is that kind of what you were looking for, Michele? Or
well, you were just we were talking earlier, and you were saying that teachers have a lot to deal with the issue of reaching out to people and making the most of digital the digitisation and that sort of thing. So
the fact that we're dealing with digital natives, and we may not be a digital native ourselves. And so what I've tried to do this afternoon is help you cross the bridge when you're teaching, especially as most of us, when we were learners ourselves, were sitting in rows behind desks, and particularly delivering the content in a way that that reaches our learners in a language that they understand, even when we don't speak it ourselves. And you don't need to speak it yourself. You just need to put the tools in front of the kids, and often they'll take your hand. I've had to do that when I'm teaching programming because I can't program, but often there's a kid in the classroom who will explain everything I'm getting wrong. Yeah, so I'm definitely trying to, and I've already put a few links in the chat box to help you translate that and use media for good when you're teaching. But yeah, and David can talk a fair bit about how he's translating Eureka Street for younger readers as well.
Yeah, David, have you got examples of how you can use media for good, relevant for the classroom experience? I mean, Eureka Street has lots of articles that could be great for discussion starters, you know, conduct respectful discussion. You know, how do you think that Eureka Street can be used in the classroom?
In a class, yeah, definitely. Thanks. I think well, I come from a teaching background as well, so that was the first thing I did at uni, which is good. So I always personally found fruitful the lessons that kind of engaged a students' existing ideas and kind of added additional kind of layers of complexity, I suppose. But you know, it's yes. But so I think what we could do, I think, for students to see and engage with publications like Eureka Street, that I think particularly important is sort of transcending the left-right paradigm, especially when we're dealing with students, let's say high school students, that younger humans, that you know, their prefrontal cortex has not yet matured, so navigating those grey areas and kind of engaging with issues that do require a degree of complexity, and kind of nurturing that diversity of ideas that isn't going to necessarily come naturally. So I think Eureka Street tries to do that. Yeah, I think what's another thing? I think from friends of mine who are teachers, there seems to be a sort of a tendency for, I think a growing tendency for activism amongst the student body, which can be a really kind of encouraging thing sometimes, which is, you know, students are tackling challenges they're seeing in the world, like climate change or economic inequality, and you've all probably seen examples of this in your student bodies. But I think on the flip side, that can come with maybe a growing acceptance of students, at least, yeah, maybe at least at university, who sort of take that activism and use it as maybe an opportunity to sort of shut down discussion rather than to engage it further. So I think what we would like to do is sort of develop ways of thinking or encourage ways of thinking where the reader does engage productively with an idea that they don't necessarily agree with. And I know that's a project that involves all of us, not just sort of teachers and students, but I think that's something that everybody's working on. But in terms of sort of specific examples, I mean, it's probably good to just look at specific areas, like specific areas that might affect students as well, like social media, for example. I haven't taught for a long time, but you all have, and what are kids doing with social media every day on their? Are they on their phones the whole time? Do you have to do a lot of confiscating? I kind of shudder to think what that's like these days. But I think it's definitely something that is worth talking about with students, given that it affects them so much and affects you too. But that's something that we're developing a piece at the moment, a big roundtable where, you know, looking at the benefits of social media, like especially in the pandemic, but also risks. I think that's definitely worth talking about. Last year, Frances Haugen, who used to work for Facebook, she's a whistleblower and released the Facebook Papers, which sort of demonstrated that Facebook, Instagram, all these giant media tech companies knew that their companies were causing a lot of harm, especially to young people. And then people like Jonathan Haidt have done a lot of research looking at how there is now ample evidence demonstrating that that excessive social media use does negatively affect the mental well-being of young people, teenagers especially, most notable in the effect of Instagram, in the use of when teenage girls use Instagram. That's kind of where it's kind of most pronounced. So this is something this is an experiment that we're all kind of up to our eyeballs in at the moment, and it's worth talking about. So so we're in that space. We're going to be producing something on that, and with 4 different people commenting on it and looking at what needs to be done here. And we don't have all the answers, and the experts we're talking about don't have all the answers, but this is definitely something that needs to be part of the national conversation. I don't know, I mean, some places in Europe are having some interesting discussions at the moment about regulation of social media, but yeah, I think we do need to place that conversation kind of front and center. We're doing a similar thing with a piece on housing as well, and this is something that would be really good to talk about in the classrooms as well. What does housing look like when there's sort of if you're a teenager right now, if you're 17 years old, what's the likelihood of you ever owning a house in Australia? It's probably pretty bleak. But I think, how do we fix that system? This is something where we need to drive productive conversation about that. So yeah, that's probably the thing that would come to mind in terms of topics and material that we're running. But again, it's just it's ongoing discussion.
And when I dip into Eureka Street, I was just thinking as you were talking about that, I often I'm looking for social justice discussion, and also looking for modelling of healthy debate. Because class discussion is such a challenge when the kids get heated, or when they don't have the knowledge to talk about what they're talking about. And Eureka Street's got some good ways to model that, and some good things to talk about.
Yeah, we have some comments from people, and just picking up on your point, Laura, accessing information without context or a chance for discussion can be a real danger for young people. So that's true. And I think you've touched on it, David, a little bit, but one of the questions is, can you give an example of how Eureka Street might approach a current issue in a way that transcends left and right? Issue might be euthanasia or refugees, but as you said, housing, there's a whole gamut of issues that you could discuss. And before David answers, just a reminder, if anybody's got any questions for David or Laura, just pop them in the chat. We'll get to them when we can. So yeah, David, an example of Eureka Street approaching current issue, sort of from the left and right.
Yeah. So I think things like euthanasia or abortion laws, we have probably a predictably Jesuit stance on that. But I think that's a debate that it's never necessarily going on. I mean, I remember talking about that, having similar conversations, like close to 25, 30 years ago. And it's, I think probably more current would be the voice to Parliament. That's something that is very much something that, our country is dealing with right now, looking at, the Albanese government is talking about a referendum and voting on constitutional recognition for Indigenous people, which is something that's really important. There has been a discussion about how it would be easy to run like a scare campaign about why we shouldn't do that, or how it would be creating a third chamber of Parliament. And I think there is the potential to kind of, and I think this maybe happened with the marriage equality debate, that it sort of just falls into two different parks, and we don't really, there's a lot of talking past each other and not really that much communication. I think with this, and we've had Frank Brennan run some pieces on this already, which is good. I think it's important to engage with with maybe this kind of what Frank Brennan raised on the piece we ran this week. It's sort of important to engage with hesitation on this, and it's important to engage with both sides of politics, because this is something we do need wide consensus on, because it is important. I think it's and something that it doesn't need to be polarized, and hopefully I think so far it's, you know, I'm probably biased. I think it's been relatively balanced, but that's a really important thing where we do need to kind of transcend the left-right divide, and we do need to find a healthy consensus and you know, move forward on that particular issue, because it does affect a lot of people on the ground. It does affect vulnerable communities. Yeah, so I think that would be one of the main ones that I think we're dealing with right now.
Thank you. Laura, how would you show media for good in the classroom? What from David can you apply, and how would you do it?
I might turn my mic on. I'm predictable in that sense too. So definitely, I think I've already mentioned, you know, healthy debate and a healthy place to start debate from in an adult way when you're trying to develop abstract thinking skills. But the other thing is actually using types of media itself in a positive way. So not only are you may talk about, from a content perspective, you might talk about social justice, or you might talk about some point of theology or something using a media article. But when you're actually teaching your class, you know, the way you use media as well, you can model your teaching on that healthy debate, or on, you know, making sure that you understand. And we're going to run an article in the upcoming edition of Australian Catholics, the spring edition, that'll give you some tips about, you know, how kids can search safely and all that sort of thing. But the other thing I think that comes up in that we can use media for good as teachers is in how we teach, because that's the first point in getting that really positive response in the classroom. So I, you know, as a media teacher, I like to use those tools to get the kids really engaged, because then they're getting the message in my, and I'm so sorry if you can hear my 5-year-old throwing a massive tanty in the background. He knows mum's on the phone, and so he's turning it on. But yeah, so I like to use those media tools to keep kids engaged, you know, because sometimes I know, particularly when I was teaching in the big boys schools in Brisbane, that the reception I got when I moved from my English classroom into my RE classroom was sometimes a little bit different. And so I was really looking to keep kids interested. And so I think the three things I like to talk about using media in the classroom as a tool is that all of a sudden you can show kids how it's relevant to their life. You can do something that they're interested in, and you can also sneakily up the literacy, because I think sometimes when you're transferring from, say, English across to the RE classroom, is that not all RE teachers are trained in literacy, and RE is pretty heavy in literacy. And so if you can support those kids through in an engaging way, all of a sudden they'll be more engaged. I brought along, is it okay if I start talking about a few strategies now, Michelle? This is where I'm going to go all teacher. I'm letting the teacher out because I've made a slideshow and it's got 13 slides. Sorry, I know they're supposed to be 12. I'm just going to share my screen. Here we go.
On that, whenever I had 13, I make it 12A, or just skip 13.
Yeah, 12A.
Go 14.
One's a title slide. Just trying to share my screen. Here we go. And I'm going to pick the right desktop. Here we go. And you'll probably just see a few of my notes sitting up here till I turn this on. All right, can we see the slides? So All right, let's talk about media for good. So I'm going to talk about some hows now. So it's going to jump. I'm going from the rest of the 5 W's across to the H. So I just want to talk a little bit today about increasing media literacy among students, because I think that sits in the background when we talk about using something like Eureka Street. You know, do kids even know there's a Catholic media where they can access their beliefs, and do they know how to access that media? That's something we can help them with in the classroom, you know, because there's that horrible gap when you move from high school out into the world yourself, and you can become disconnected from your faith even if you don't want to. And so that's something we can help them with, and I get the pleasure of doing that every day when I'm working. So we can use media tools to engage students on topics related to faith and justice, or we can use them to increase engagement. And so I talked about those 3 things, you know, novelty, relevance, and literacy support. And I think using some media tools to teach content is a way to combine all 3. And I've gone backwards instead of forwards. So I've got 4 different ideas to share with you today. For lower primary, I was racking my brain with this, because when their literacy is low, you know, how do you do something really engaging when maybe they can't type yet and things like that? But I did come up with the idea of a book trailer, and what better book to talk about than a book from the Bible? You know, you can talk about the whole Bible, or you can talk about one of the various books in the Bible, or you could talk about, you know, you could tell a story about a parable, you know. So that's a really easy way, and kids can actually film their little book trailer or the, you know, book review, or they can present it to the class as though they're on a TV show. So I think in lower primary, that's probably one of the easier ones to access. And from a teacher's point of view, you can get support on that from the teacher librarian, because book trailers are kind of their bread and butter. But as we're moving up, things get a little more interesting. So I've dumped a heap of links into the chat, but I don't know how well that translated or whether you can see it. So maybe just leave a notice to let me see if you can see them. But I'm happy to share these slides as well if you want to email me at the end of the presentation. But a really good resource for using media in the classroom is the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, which is in Melbourne, and they have some very good resources online to support teachers with things like presenting a book trailer. Software suggestions you may already have in your school. There's probably someone in your school using Scratch. Scratch can be quite complex, but it's a really good one. But if you are really early on your journey of using ICTs, Little Bird Tales is great. It's just straight out storytelling, and it's really easy to use. There's another one called Story Maker that's very, very simple, a web-based one. A new one I found is Comic Life, I think for reluctant readers or early readers that, you know, making comic strips or storyboards or whatever's really simple. And then I've just listed another article there that I'm happy to share at the end. But that's just a little brief one about early primary school, because I felt bad about leaving them out. But I think one of the things we have just done as part of our sort of idea that we really want to share our work more with young people through Australian Catholics is running the Young Voices Awards. And so one of the opportunities we provided there was to offer kids the opportunity to send us in a digital production on this year's theme, which was Media for Good. And a few kids did have a go at making a short film. And I think that's one of the things that we can explore more in the media classroom, is rather than just having kids read a speech to a tape and call it a podcast or something, how can we actually get them to combine images, sound and editing techniques to make meaning? So, you know, in the RE classroom, we can ask students to design, produce and edit a short video. It's much easier now than it used to be, especially with tablets. And their critique, their actual content can be provided via narration and supported by how they've combined sound and images and editing techniques like, you know, fades and superimpositions and things like that. And the thing about this for primary school teachers, if there's any primary school teachers in the audience, is this works across the curriculum. You can have more than one task sheet. You can be assessing English at the same time as you're assessing RE, and making it a really rich task that way. My tool of choice at the moment is really simple, and I know my kids are using tablets up here in Brisbane at school, and tablets are so easy to film and edit on, especially when you've got things like Adobe Rush that's available now. And I think if you're an RE teacher who's not used to doing this before, just remember to upload everything. If you want to make your tablet talk to a desktop, for example, depending on what software you've got available and where you're working, that you can use the cloud to transfer things. And that video and sound files can be quite large. So you might need to, I think that's where most teachers fall down, is actually in that technical stuff. So remember to just, you know, ask questions at school about how you can make it work, so that when you're in the classroom, you don't feel like you're struggling. The best stuff that I've seen for a while to support you in sort of filmmaking is in the classroom is again, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. That's their bread and butter. And I've got a heap of links here, but if you go to their website and look in teaching resources, then you'll find guides on how to do this and lesson plans. I think the thing is, if you're feeling overwhelmed by making a big piece in the classroom and managing the time and that, is that it's just like writing an essay. It's just like writing a paragraph, depending on who you're. All of the work is in the planning and getting the kids to think at the start. And the execution should not be most of the time. It's really about how you implement that group work effectively, and it's really how you teach the kids to plan. And so they should be drawing pictures, they should be writing a script, they should be practicing before they film, and they should be telling you about their plan, like pitching it before they go out and do it. And so the actual filming is probably only one lesson. And they shouldn't just be sort of sitting around the classroom. They should be going out with a plan and in an organised manner. But the how to, go and have a look at ACME if you haven't seen it already. And I'm also going to start putting some of this in my Catholic Teacher newsletter that I send out each week. If you haven't signed up for that, if you go to the Education Hub and have a look in the top right corner, you can actually sign up for Catholic Teacher. So I'm going to put some of this into the teacher's notes in the next few weeks. This is the one I'm really excited to share with you, because I hear my daughter's doing lots with Minecraft at school, but I don't know if she does much with Minecraft and RE. And in our when we've been talking to schools about the Education Hub, people keep asking us for resources about the life and times of Jesus. And I think Minecraft's what you want to be using when you're talking about you know, geography and history. And life in Jesus's time, and understanding that, because Minecraft is a really great way to teach geography and history. And so, you know, if I was walking into the classroom tomorrow and someone said, what are you going to do to teach the life and times of Jesus? I'd be saying, well, I'd really like to have a go at making a map of Israel or Palestine using Minecraft, because the kids are just so engaged through Minecraft, and it offers an education edition. They're falling over themselves to get into the classroom. And if you use it properly, it is safe. You want to be using creative mode and that sort of thing. So I put a link up here about the old way to do it, but, you know, let's talk about some worksheets where we draw places on the map. And you know, we might say Jesus was here on the map or something like that, or we might even draw a timeline, you know, of Jesus's journey of mission. But we're still going to do exactly that. We're just going to use Minecraft to do it. And so if you look on Edutopia, if you've come across George Lucas's Education Foundation, there's a really good article on there about, and I've put a link to it about the benefits of using Minecraft, but they tend to sit in literacy, geography and history, as well as maths and science. But in this case, I think geography, history and language are what you would find in the RE curriculum. So if I was using this in my own classroom, I would hybridise a social studies model with a media teaching model and apply it to RE. So I'd be asking the kids to research exactly the same way as I always did. You know, what's the life and times of Jesus like? Then I'd be asking them to design their map in Minecraft, or their landscape, I should be saying their landscape in Minecraft. They can produce it. That's their fun lessons. That's their buy-in. They really enjoy Minecraft. It's addictive to them and they talk about it. It's part of their social lives. And then at the end, I'd ask them to explain what they did in a speech, or in an essay, or in a critique, or in a piece to camera, or something as my assessment. And then you've got buy-in. You know, they're going to want to turn up to RE because they've got Minecraft running in the classroom, and you don't actually need to know that much yourself because they're already across it. So just make sure you go to the Minecraft education site and you know how to do it safely. They shouldn't be in the normal Minecraft game. They should be in the education version, and your school's probably already signed up to it. So I would use it to teach about the history and geography, maybe of Israel in Jesus's time. I'd still use my same orientating activities that I've always used, you know, some sort of craft, or I might show them another geography project that's not from the RE classroom, and then they know where they're going by the end of that lesson. So there's some examples on the Minecraft website about building a map of Portugal. Okay, so, you know, if you don't know how to do it yourself, you can copy that and just substitute Israel in Jesus's time for Portugal. There's also, you can also talk about other things, you know, the architecture of the temples. They might build a temple, because you can build landmarks in Minecraft as well. Or you might build Gethsemane, or you might, you know, build the village where the disciples came from and they were fishing. I think it was more of a city. But and also ACME again has another guide to teaching geography using Minecraft that I think is quite applicable in the RE classroom. You can hit lots of cross-curriculum priorities using this. Numeracy and map making is a big one. My daughter's doing it right now in grade 3. Map reading skills. So those Australian cross-curriculum priorities, we can bring them into the RE classroom through this as well, using literacy and numeracy, and obviously the geography and history we're talking about. So if building a whole landscape seems daunting to you, you can just have kids. I couldn't find a picture of an actual landmark very quickly in PowerPoint, so I've got the Jesus statue in Brazil, but you could actually build a picture of a landmark, and just each student can make the landmark rather than making a whole landscape or working together to make a landscape. And the final one I wanted to talk about was, and if you've got any questions about this, because I've just run through it really quickly because I didn't want to go over time, but pop them in the chat box and I'll have a quick look. But the final thing I wanted to talk about is real world contexts for RE. So the kids really love it. It's so easy to teach social justice, and compared to some of the other topics. But if you want to talk about something more theological or more heavy, you can, and that doesn't always have action, because it's so easy if you say to kids, oh, you know, let's talk about ministering to the poor or something, that they often have a lot of buy-in in that when you're teaching. But when you're in those other units that they don't have that buy-in to and that real life context, then give it to them through media and get them to write a feature article and get them to actually submit it to the Young Voices Awards, or get them to actually take photos to support that. Again, you know, submit it to the Young Voices Awards with us. We have a young writers community, and be selective and tell the kids to compete. You know, okay, I'm only going to send the best one in, and then actually send it in. And you can, if you're keeping an eye on the Education Hub, you might find a way to tie in some of your educational experiences with some of the opportunities we offer young writers. And I think a good place to do that is maybe in the secondary classroom, or in the the late secondary classroom. Oh, it fits anywhere. We have young writers who are quite young, and maybe if you're in what's it called, the board subject that that goes with RE as well. That might be a good place, depending on what your syllabus in your state says. We also have an around the schools section. So if students, you know, if you're doing something in your classroom that's really interesting, then you can actually say to students as part of their assessment, all right, you know, the culminating activity is going to be writing this feature article about what we've been learning. And you know, I'll pick the best one and send it into the magazine. If, you know, and it might not be to us, it might be to the local paper as a letter to the editor, or it might be to the school newsletter, or it might be presenting on school assembly. But using the genres of the media can be very engaging as well. And English Classroom does it, but you know, it's RE class can do it as well. So I might just wrap it up there. And with my little, I just wanted to show you my next slide, which is just that. You can find our Young Writers community. If you go into the Education Hub and you look under About Us, you can actually find the Young Voices Award, the Young Writers community. We have an internship program, but that would be more for students to apply to if they had an interest in writing. But for in terms of teaching and trying to give a real world context and give students a voice, some buy-in, this is going somewhere real. They're the two that we offer, plus the around the schools. And I've also put my address there, because I'm always interested in hearing about what you need to support you in terms of content as well. And I'll try and address that through Catholic Teacher. But we do, one word of note about our particular magazine is that we do the physical magazine, or the online version, you know, the quarterly editions that come out are based around a theme. So not all articles can be used, but we definitely all ears, and we're definitely open to a random submission. But the best way to get stuff into the magazines through the Young Writers community or the Young Voices Award. Yeah, so I might leave it there and go back to discussing instead of just talking to slides. But thanks for taking the time to listen. I'll just stop my screen share. I think I stopped my screen share, did I?
Sorry,
No.
I need to unmute myself. Yes, you did stop your screen share, and thank
beautiful.
you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
To you, and perhaps to anybody else, you know, how do we keep kids safe while learning using digital media in the classroom?
Is that one for me, or
well, you and whether anybody else and who's listening, you know, got any great ideas as well that they might want to share? But I'm targeting you, Laura.
No worries at all. Well, I think David touched upon it earlier, and when I was doing the article on rabbit holes for the upcoming edition, the whole idea is supporting students to filter and understand whether information is credible or not. And I think the way that the one thing we need to target in the RE classroom is helping students to understand that there are lots of different Christian denominations, and that not everything you find about Christianity on the internet is from a Catholic source. And that particular Christian church, their beliefs may differ. And I think one of the big things that used to come up in my classroom was there's lots of material that's a literal interpretation of the Bible online, and kids, when they're trying to razzle you a bit when you're teaching, will bring that up, you know, and so teaching them how to judge whether something is from a reliable Catholic source and using those reliable Catholic sources when you're teaching helps them to filter and to understand and to be really transparent in showing them, look, I chose this, I know this is a Catholic source, because, you know, it's run by the Jesuits in our case, and or it's come from the Vatican, or it's from the Australian Bishops' Conference, and really modelling and making sure that they know there's different versions of the Bible as well, you know, making sure that they're using, if they're using Bible Gateway, because I use Bible Gateway, making sure that it's turned on to the NRSV and not one of the Anglican Bibles, because it tends to default to that. So when kids are researching, let's have those conversations very overtly, so that they understand that their research is coming from a Catholic viewpoint, and coming from a Catholic source, so that they get the best information. Also, what exists, so when they leave school, they can find their way to it again, and use it. So there's yeah, I think that's the biggest RE focused way that I come across to judge information.
Interesting you mentioned Australian Catholic bishops. I always look at them every week, and there's something wrong with their security settings. So I got big red flags yesterday going, you can't, yeah, this is a dangerous website, which I found entirely very amusing. So yeah, even when you do things right, you get them wrong. Anybody got anything else that they would like to share with us? Thank you very much, David and Laura, for your time. I hope that everybody's found it useful, and please, you know, keep checking in. We're having at least 2 Q&As a term, and we covering subjects that hopefully will be of great interest. So thank you very much.
And I'll just quickly jump in to say thanks, Michelle, for hosting. Thanks everyone who shared things through the chat. I did post the links as Laura was doing, but if you haven't had a chance to take them all down, don't worry, we will make them available via the AC+E newsletter that goes out. And as Laura mentioned, she'll be using them in Catholic Teacher as well. There was a comment there around, you know, where to get a list of reputable and good resources. Laura in Catholic Teacher has been putting together our teaching resources every week now, and is basically helping us do that, getting good resources and good links to kind of reputable places together. So it is good and helpful to do that. But it's also a good suggestion that we might actually add to the website to sort of do a list of other places that people could go to as well. So thanks for that suggestion too.